from the families of Hamas prisoners to the politicians in his own government. Netanyahu's popularity is at an all-time low. Beirut, Lebanon. As families of Israeli captives held in Gaza marched from Tel Aviv to Benjamin Netanyahu's home in Jerusalem on Saturday, Israel's longest-serving prime minister has never been more popular. Netanyahu's popularity among Israeli Jews is around 4%, according to a November 14 poll, and both his rivals and traditional allies are calling on him to resign once the current war is over. Given that has presided over the largest intelligence security failure in Israeli history, he is more vulnerable than has ever been in his political career, said Khalid El-Jindi, an expert on Palestinian-Israeli affairs at the Middle East Institute, Washington, D.C. Aljazeera. Prime ministers have fallen for much less than that. Netanyahu has struggled with criticism since winning elections last November and forming the most right-wing government in the country's history. There were protests during Netanyahu's last term due to judicial reform initiatives. But experts say October 7 has eroded even much of the support Netanyahu once had. I suspect there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the leadership of the government, even within its own party. Zachary Lockman, an expert on Palestine and Israel at New York University, told Al Jazeera, hostage failures in Israel. 94% of population believes that Netanyahu's government is at least partially responsible for the events of October 7, when Hamas fighters breached border fence and attacked southern Israel, killing 1,200 people. A majority of Israelis believed in days after the attack that Netanyahu should resign after war was over. And that disappointment has only grown since then. Much the criticism Netanyahu has centered on his apparent lack interest in the release more than 200 captives held by Hamas and other armed groups in Gaza. On Friday, Israel found the bodies of at least 2 of the captives, as a result of mediation efforts led by Qatar and other countries. 4 captives were released, but Netanyahu has so far rejected a larger deal that would see a temporary ceasefire in exchange for the release of more captives. He said he would only consider stopping the attack on Gaza once all hostages were released. Reports suggest that Palestinian groups offered to release at least 50 hostages in exchange for a 3-day ceasefire, but Netanyahu allegedly rejected the deal. U.S. President Joe Biden has so far backed Netanyahu's opposition to the ceasefire, despite growing international protests and disapproval from the U.S. Democratic Party. They have full support of the United States, but Biden administration's patience may run out at some point, Lockman said. Demands for a ceasefire are increasing in the United States as well as in Europe and elsewhere. Netanyahu may maintain Biden's support, but his own base is wearing out. Yahael Zohar, Likud-affiliated mayor town of Netivot,